UFC 263, Israel Adesanya versus Marvin Vettori 2, the rematch. This is definitely one of the biggest cards on the year. Two title fights, Davison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno, also on this card. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video. He goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris, and we are Boxing MMA Picks, giving you our UFC fight-by-fight breakdown and analysis, specifically from the betting perspective. We're here to let you know which fights are worth the value, which fights you definitely want to be avoiding, which underdogs you want to take a shot at, and even if you stick around to the end, you might get a little bit of parlay action. As usual, please subscribe to the channel if you do appreciate this video. Press the thumbs up, like, and let's have some good commentary in the comments. 13 fights on this card, starting with the prelims. That is pretty packed with 8 fights. So we got a lot of work to do. We're going to get right into fight number 1. To open up the card, we have Carlos Felipe versus Jake Collier. And looking at this fight, of course, I'll start with my analysis. Carlos Felipe, he's on a 2-fight winning streak, coming off of a split decision win versus Justin Tafa. That was only 5 or 6 months ago, back in January. 6 of his 10 wins, you look at his record, 10-1. 6 of those wins are by knockout. Of course, earlier fights in his career, but nonetheless, definitely shows that he has that pop in his hands. Like many heavyweights, of course, he is going to keep it on the feet. Pretty solid hands, pretty solid boxing. You know, definitely willing to engage, and he wants to engage at times if there really isn't any action going on. Showed a pretty decent chin in his 3 UFC fights so far as well. So from the heavyweight perspective, there is some trust there. And he's pretty durable, hasn't really shown any glaring cardio concern in any of his fights. Looking at Jake Collier, on the other hand, he's coming off of a win versus Gian Villante. That was December 2020. And I remember in that fight, I mean, I pretty much had him counted out at the time. But he did come back and perform. He did look physically better compared to his fight versus Tom Aspinall 5 months prior to that. Of course, we know in that Aspinall fight, he was coming off of a 3-year layoff. He was a light heavyweight 3 years ago, came back at heavyweight 60 pounds heavier, didn't really know what he was going to look like. Tom Aspinall got rid of him pretty quickly. But then again, he did look decent in that Gian Villante fight. In that fight specifically, he looked pretty light on his feet, decent movement around the ring. He'll definitely switch stance at times too. Likes that calf kick. He'll use it often in the stand-up, especially against guys who are heavy on their feet, a la Carlos Felipe. Pretty good fakes with him, pretty good level changes with that jab, good jab in general. His stand-up looked pretty clean, for this division. And again, he mixes his strikes up pretty well between the hands and the feet, going back to that Gian Villante fight. In some ways, this fight is 50-50, the way I see it. I mean, I can see Collier using those kicks to his advantage, like I mentioned. I can see Felipe really looking to engage more and just be effective in those mix-up, those close counter situations. Don't get me wrong. I do think Jake Collier as the dog plus 145, I do think he's live. In fact, I think he might be the better overall striker at the very least at this point. But, ultimately, I feel Jake Collier, he gets hit just a little bit more. And I do see him sort of fading as this fight goes on. Close fight, could be one of those split decision type of fights, but I'm leaning on the side of Carlos Felipe.
Yeah, that's fair, man. You got to give Carlos his respect. He had a war with Justin Tafa. He upset Jorgen De Castro. Now, he had a real hard time with Sergey Spivak. Spivak implemented a lot of takedowns. In this fight, I don't think he has to worry about a lot of takedowns. I think a lot of this fight's going to be on the feet. And, Collier, when I look at Jake Collier, I'm not sure what I'm going to get. When he came out against Aspinall, he was clearly out of shape. And then he came out against James Villante, and he was looking much better. He was in much better shape, and his performance, he had a real good performance. He has some real good leg kicks, and I think that's gonna be a move that he should go to in this fight, because I don't think Carlos Felipe checks a lot of the leg kicks, and I think he's open for the leg kicks. So Collier definitely has those leg kicks, but I think that Felipe has the better boxing, and I think that with his size, and as we know in his fight versus Tafa, he came on in that 3rd round, right? So he he can keep that cardio going. He can keep that pace going. Even in his fight versus that guy, Jorgen De Castro, who's no longer, I don't think he's with UFC anymore. But even in that fight, he kept a high pace for 3 rounds. So I know he can go 3 rounds with that pace. If no one gets knocked out, he's likely going to win this fight. And Felipe has a really good chin. He has never been knocked out. So I'm going to go with Felipe, the better boxer, in my opinion. And I think, yeah, just like you, as the fight goes on, I think it's his fight here. He has really good cardio, and he puts on a pretty good pace. And for a guy his size, he moves well. So I like Carlos Felipe in this spot, the natural heavyweight versus Jake, who spent most of his time not as a heavyweight. So I'm going to go with Carlos Felipe here.
Yeah, Jake at one point was a middleweight, and then again had a couple of fights at light heavyweight, and then now we see him as essentially an out of shape heavyweight at this point, despite looking physically better in his last fight. So let's see what happens in that one. But I think we are both in agreement with Carlos Felipe being the pick. So we're going to move on to fight number 2, Fares Ziam versus Luigi Vendramini. What I'll say for this one, I mean, 2 young prospects going at it. I think both of these guys are under the age of 25, if I'm not mistaken. In a lot of ways, I mean, this is a definition of a 50-50 fight. You look at the odds, you see Fares Ziam at minus 135, and you're seeing Luigi there at plus 115. So very close with the odds on here. You know, both of these guys have very similar styles of attack, very similar movement around the ring. Both of these guys fight from the outside. And ultimately, this is going to be a kickboxing match, right? I mean, Fares Ziam, when you look at him, he's coming off of a unanimous decision win versus Jamie Malarkey. That was back in October 2020. You know, he's pretty tall for the division, right? We see him standing there at 6'1". He's going to use that height. He's going to use that reach at his advantage, and he's considered a kickboxer. Like we mentioned, in terms of how I anticipate this fight going, he definitely shows that in his style. Pretty long jab, you know, pretty good kicks. His kicks hurt. You know, used to be a K1 champion, very comfortable on his feet, good timing with his counter punches as well, and good movement around the ring. He'll definitely fight from the outside, as I mentioned. You know, Vendramini, on the other hand, he's coming off of a very impressive TKO win versus Jessin Ayari. That was, again, also in October 2020. So good on the odds, good on the matchmakers here to get 2 guys that have had the same amount of time off as one another. And again, with Luigi Vendramini, good lateral movement was the very first thing that I noticed from him. A very sharp calf kick was the second thing I noticed about him. You know, he keeps his hands up defensively, fights from the outside, good fakes, good feints, a really good counterpuncher. Again, if you go back to his last fight where he won by TKO, that was off of a counterpunch. He exploded with a combination. I think there was a leg kick involved in there as well, and it led to the knockout. You know, a bit of a grappler as well in some ways. You know, he does look comfortable when he's on his opponent's back. Submission attempts, body lock for control, different things like that. You know, I wouldn't call that a strength of his per se. Doesn't have any takedowns in the UFC to this point, so I'm not saying that's specifically an advantage. Like I said, this should be a kickboxing match. I think Vendramini, he has maybe that toughness advantage in, you know, compared to Fares Ziam in fights that I've seen Ziam in, but I do think Ziam has the height and reach advantage, and I think that's going to be the difference for him. And I also think that he's a bit more technical as a striker. So very close match. Not mad at you know, the pick going in either direction. I definitely don't want to bet on this, but from making a pick, I'm going with Fares Ziam.
Yeah, that's a fair pick. When you look at Luigi Vendramini, remember his first fight in the UFC was short notice versus Elizu Zaleski. And at one point, he had Zaleski hurt in that fight. And then eventually, obviously, it was finished by flying knee. But this is a tough fight stylistically, because he's going to be fighting a taller fighter, a guy that has good striking, that I believe in this fight is the better striker. But there's something about Vendramini, man. He has a little bit of a spark to him. And he has a bit of power, as you've seen when he put away Ayari when they fought. And in this fight, I think he can mix up some takedowns. Like Ziam has been taken down many times in the UFC. I don't believe he won his last fight versus Malarkey. I'm almost 100% Malarkey won that fight and got robbed here. Again, I think this is a close match here. I'm not putting any money on this fight, but I'm going to actually bank on Luigi Vendramini here. I think his stand-up is serviceable. I think his stand-up is decent enough. It's not better, but I think he has a much better grappling game. I think even though he's the smaller fighter come fight night, I think that he has a good chance to get this to the mat here. So I'm going to roll with him. I think he's the underdog in this match, and I'm going to roll the underdog here, Vendramini.
And for what it's worth, Vendramini, I mean, he was my original pick when I was initially taking a look at these two guys. So I'm not mad at that at all. Let's move on to fight number 3. In that case, we have Chase Hooper versus Steven Peterson. We sort of know who Chase Hooper is at this point. You know, of course, still very young in his UFC career, but in terms of what we've seen so far, first of all, he is a southpaw on the feet. You know, in some ways, not really much else to mention with his stand-up. It's not his strong suit. You know, he leaves his chin up. He's a little chinny as well. We saw what Alex Caceres was able to do with him, and he's exposed to leg kicks. He doesn't really check them from what I've seen. Of course, we know with Chase Hooper, we're going to expect a grapple-heavy attack out of him. You know, he's also comfortable grappling off of his back. So he's going to be in those situations where almost by any means necessary, let's take this to the ground. But with Chase Hooper, you know, you look at those glaring takedown numbers here, 0.32 takedowns per fight at 7% takedown accuracy. He's definitely more of a grappler as opposed to a wrestler. So I don't necessarily see him as a takedown threat, despite the ground game being his clear advantage. When I look at Steven Peterson, on the other hand, first of all, important to note, he hasn't fought since September 2019. There's always question marks when a fighter takes that much time off of how he will return. He's not old, though. I think he's in his low 30s. So, you know, I'm not expecting a bunch of question marks, but nonetheless, you still kind of ask yourself how it's going to go. He's pretty solid on the feet. He's a pretty active striker. You know, throws one punch at a time, though. Solid pop, especially with that right hand. And I've also seen him use a solid right hand to the body. I mean, again, you know how I feel about strikers that strike to the body, especially with their hands. It definitely shows a higher level of IQ. And he combines those with kicks as well. So again, showing that striking diversity. I've seen him take a shot as well. Not saying Chase Hooper is a power threat, but I've seen him take a shot. So for what it's worth, he definitely has some survival ability in him, despite his 9 losses. He is a good grappler too. I mean, if he has that ability to get you down, his takedown numbers are, of course, a bit better. 2 takedowns per fight, 30% accuracy, but nonetheless, still a little bit better and a pretty healthy 2 takedowns per fight, as I mentioned. Again, he's a pretty decent grappler. I've seen him score points on the ground in those situations, submission attempts, body locks, positional improvement. He'll pass. You know, decent ground and pound. He stays pretty active on top as well, so that the ref is not really going to risk standing it up. You know, ultimately what it comes down to is this. In Chase Hooper fights, we have to think about that ground game. You know, in Steven Peterson's last fight versus Martin Bravo was able to get him down pretty easily on his first attempt. I don't see Hooper doing that necessarily. I mean, again, we point out his 7% takedown accuracy. But Steven Peterson, you know, he did show me a good active guard. He showed me that he was able to get up quickly, and then he was able to defend that takedown well later on in the fight. So even if Hooper does land that first early takedown, I don't see that as something that Hooper can constantly go to. Realistically, I don't really see a path for Chase Hooper here. I think Peterson can match the grappling to some degree. And I also think Peterson has the better stand-up. So just under those pretenses, I'm going to have to go with Steven Peterson. He's going to be my pick.
Yeah. When you look at Chase Hooper, obviously the UFC's trying hard to give him a match that's favorable here. But as you indicated, his takedown percentage is not good. So he is live on the mat, but he's not good at getting the fight to the mat. As you've seen in his fight versus David Tamor, he got hurt. And then obviously he turned it around against Alex Caceres. He just got pieced up. He couldn't get the fight to the mat. And he definitely has the worst stand-up in the whole UFC in any division, even the women's division. This guy has the worst stand-up, Chase Hooper. Against Peter Barrett. Peter Barrett was arguably winning that fight. And then, yeah, he got caught with a heel hook. You got to give credit to Chase Hooper there, right? His jiu-jitsu is definitely a game changer where he can latch on a submission in the third round. But in this fight, I'm gonna roll with Peterson here, Steven Peterson. The reason being is he's a rounded out MMA fighter. He's not the best in any area, but he's the better striker in this fight. He should have some resistance to the takedown, and he has 75% takedown defense. So he knows what to do to keep on the feet. And you got to think, okay, he got this fight. He's training for this matchup. He's training out of Combat Sports and Fitness. I'm sorry, Chase Hooper is training out of Combat Sports. But you got to think that Steven Peterson, who got this match, he's training out of Fortis MMA, a big MMA gym. And he's fighting Chase Hooper. You got to think that he got the game plan that Chase Hooper's only way to win this fight is to get this to the ground. And he's the far better stand-up fighter. He hasn't had a fight like this in a long time where he has such a stand-up advantage. So I see him coming out here ready to keep this on the mat, keep this on the feet, stopping the takedowns. And I don't think he has to train much to outstrike Chase Hooper. Again, I really think he has the worst striking in the entire UFC. So I'm going to go with Steven Peterson. That's my pick here to win this fight.
Good pick. So let's move on to fight number 4. Now, we had Frank Camacho versus Matt Frevola scheduled. Frank Camacho did pull out of that fight as per our last update. So moving on to the new fight number 4, we have Pannie Kianzad versus Alexis Davis. What I will say is I like Kianzad here. I mean, I'll kind of get right to it. I like Kianzad here. Alexis Davis might have the ground advantage, although Pannie Kianzad has pretty decent takedown defense. Ultimately, I like Kianzad because Davis, for the ground to be her specialty, ultimately, this is kind of similar to Chase Hooper in some ways. That takedown average is way too low. You're getting less than 1 per fight. You're landing it at less than 41%. But that is essentially your only path to victory. I just don't quite see that happening. With Pannie Kianzad, I've seen her get taken down to the ground. Don't get me wrong. But I'm referring to her fight versus Sijara Eubank. Eubank was able to take her down pretty early, but Pannie Kianzad showed a great ability and a great IQ to get up. She showed improved position. She showed, defensive submission attempts. If we're looking at her takedown defense in general, in 4 UFC fights, she has an 83% takedown defense. So I like her as this fight goes on. I especially like her after round 1. When I look at Kianzad, she is on a 3-fight win streak as well. You got to imagine in this bantamweight division, she is trying to make some noise. Really good stand-up, pretty fluid stand-up. We know she has good boxing, keeps the range, mixes in the kicks as well. Really likes that hook, whether it's as a counterpunch or whether she uses it to close distance. Solid tie clinch as well from her. Decent clinch in general against the cage. She is physically strong, almost deceptively strong in some ways. And she can definitely exit those clinches with dangerous strikes, a la elbows and things like that. As I mentioned with Alexis Davis, she's a BJJ black belt, veteran, 36-year-old fighter at this point, definitely has improved striking. She is willing to stay on the feet and engage. We saw that in the Sabina Matzo fight, for example, which was her last fight, if I'm not mistaken. But ultimately, like I said, she is looking to take the fight to the ground. She's going to aggressively look for those clinch situations, aggressively look for those takedown situations. And you know what? She is pretty good on the ground. So I understand why she does that. But like I said, almost similar to the Sijara Eubank fight in some ways, the takedown may be effective for round 1, although Kianzad may still be able to get back up. But in rounds 2, as that goes on, and then in round 3, I don't see Alexis Davis being able to use that as a threat. So I'm going with Pannie Kianzad. I think she has a big advantage on the feet as well. So she's going to be my pick.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna make it quick here. Pannie Kianzad, that's my pick. It is a female fight, so you got to be careful, obviously, in every female fight, unless Amanda Nunes is fighting. You got to be careful because Alexis Davis is a veteran. Just like she did against Sabina Maslov, took the fight to the mat, and in this fight as well, she definitely has the advantage there. But we're looking at Pannie Kianzad. She's been looking really, really good lately. So she's definitely improving every fight. And she has 83% takedown defense. She's definitely the better striker. And if you look at the fighters that Alexis Davis has troubles with, Viviana Rojo, Jennifer Maya, Caitlin Chukagian, I think Pannie Kianzad can fit the mold a bit there. And in terms of keeping it on the feet and outstriking her just like they did. Sabina Maisel she didn't know what to do on the mat. Pannie Kianzad has real good jiu-jitsu as well. I wouldn't be surprised if she gets a takedown. But again, the safer way, keep this fight on the feet, just like Arojo, Maya, and Chukagian did, and pretty much just piece her up. So I like Pannie here to win this fight here. And I'm pretty confident she gets this done, but because it's a female fight, I'm not going to put the stamp on.
I feel the exact same way. And again, yes, that beware in some sense does exist. So maybe can't put the official stamp on that, but I do also feel pretty good about Pannie Kianzad again for what that is worth. Let's move on to fight number 5. In that case, we have Movsar Evloev versus Hakeem Dawodu. This might be a sneak fight of the night here. How do you feel about this?
I'm going to be real fast on this prediction here, because it's pretty much when you look at this fight, this is a grappler versus a striker. Hakeem Dawodu out of Canada is a striker. He's definitely the better striker. If Evloev wants to play on the feet for 3 rounds, I think that I know Hakeem's going to hurt him in the striking area if it plays out a lot on the feet. So I think that Hakeem is a good underdog play. If you're looking for a good underdog that has a good advantage in a certain area in the match, because he has a big striking advantage. He's beaten grapplers, Zabira Tubagov. I think he's one of Khabib's boys. Julio Arce, a boxer. Kyle Bochniak pretty much does everything. He beat Austin Arnett. So this guy's going to have a real good striking advantage here. But I think he's going to have a hard time because he's fighting one of these guys, these Russian guys. He's one of those Khabib type fighters. And he's the type of guy that he'll keep going for those takedowns. He'll spam the takedowns in a fight like this. I know he had a bad fight versus Nick Lentz where it went split decision, but Evloev definitely won that fight. It shouldn't have been a split decision. But this is a different matchup. This is a fighter that Evloev can pretty much take down if he shoots in. Unlike Nick Lentz, who had the wrestling advantage. And Evloev's striking's improving every fight. So I see the fight going like this. I see Hakeem Dawodu doing really good in the striking, winning the fight. Then I see, as the fight goes on, a minute goes in, 2 minutes goes in. At some point, Evloev gets the fight to the mat, wins the round. Second round, he does pretty much the same thing, but he gets to take down earlier. And then the third round, whatever happens, right? But at this point, Evloev's up 2 rounds clearly. And he's going to win this fight. So I'm going to go Movsar Evloev to implement a heavy grappling game here after he sees he can't hang with the striking. And in the grappling, I don't think Hakeem can handle Evloev. I'm from Canada, so I don't want to go against my fellow Canadian fighter, but I think Russia has us here. So I'm going to go Evloev.
Yeah, I'll keep mine really short because ultimately you mentioned, the key to this fight, in my opinion, and it is that ground game. We know Evloev can use that, can implement that, and we know that he will use that and implement that. And to the point of the stand-up, yes, Dawodu has, better stand-up, definitely. But, let's not take away from Evloev's ability to strike, pretty high level, pretty good boxing, pretty good kickboxing, definitely has some sneaky pop in his punches as well. Pretty accurate and good jab overall too. So, he will show some ability to hang on the feet. For the most part, he'll hang on the feet, although again, Dawodu is going to have advantages there. But again, that ground game is going to be too much. I see him implementing that, and I see him using that to secure him at least 2 rounds. So let's move on to fight number 6. In that case, we have Lauren Murphy versus Joanne Calderwood. Both fighters are coming off of wins. Lauren Murphy, 37 years old, she had a pretty good performance versus a prospect in Shakirova in her last fight. Comes forward in her stand-up, not a high-level striker necessarily, but definitely has some solid boxing. She picks her shots well. She's pretty patient, cuts the ring off well, decent jab as well, and uses that jab to set things up. Decent striking defense. She can load up and engage in combinations as well. And looking at her takedown defense, should that be a factor in this fight, it is at 70%. She is physically strong for this flyweight division. So that physique is going to work to her advantage. Looking at Joanne Calderwood, on the other hand, she has a Muay Thai kickboxing style. It's very evident in her stand-up. She throws hands and feet, very good Thai clinch as well. She strikes first pretty often. She strikes, in combinations, leg heavy approach at times, almost that sort of point fighting, swords fight type of approach at times. Plus she likes things like push kicks, mixes it up really well. I think in some ways, this is an interesting clash of styles, specifically on the feet. Murphy has that more boxing oriented style. Calderwood, like I mentioned, she's going to, have that more kickboxing oriented style using hands and feet. And usually that favors the person who can do more. And I believe the person who can do more is Joanne Calderwood in this fight. But at the same time, I think that Lauren Murphy almost has that toughness X factor. And I think that could win her the fight. And when I think about what happened early in the Joanne Calderwood versus Jessica Ai fight, for example, now Calderwood did end up winning that fight, but Jessica Ai was doing very well on the feet. She was doing it with toughness. She was winning that battle of attrition, so to speak. More of that boxing oriented style as well, or at least I should say a hands oriented style, hands dominant style. Maybe not necessarily the most technical boxing, but she was kind of winning that first round until her cardio gave in. I think Murphy is going to have a smarter game plan on the feet compared to Jessica Ai in that specific matchup, and I don't think she's going to tire out in the same way that Jessica Ai did, who came out at a pretty blistering pace to start the fight. So I think Lauren Murphy can game plan here. I think as the underdog, she does have a shot. And I'm actually going to go with Lauren Murphy on this one. So she's going to be my pick.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like this fight, this is the hardest fight for me on the card. Complete hardest fight. Because I don't know. Because when I look at both fighters, I look at Lauren Murphy. And she has good takedowns. As you said, she's strong for the division. She's going to be able to get Joanne to the mat. And she could win rounds. And then you have Joanne, who's methodical, who's pretty able to get a lot of these fights to go at her pace. And she's able to slow it down and mix in her low kicks, her jab, her decent boxing for the division. But again, this is a fight I don't want any part of. After doing all my research, what it tells me is anyone can win this matchup. There's no way you can feel confident on either side if you watch the video. So I'm gonna literally let me get a coin. I'm gonna literally flip a coin here because I'm gonna first say in my opinion, don't bet on this fight. So I'm gonna go heads Murphy, Calderwood, tails, Joanne Calderwood.
I'm
telling you, man. I'm telling you right now, this fight, listen, Calderwood could win these rounds. She could get the underhooks and avoid the ground, right? Okay, that can happen. And then I think she could win a striking match, just outpointing Murphy. But if Murphy gets this to the mat, Joanne's not going to be the same when she gets up. And then Murphy will get it back to the mat second round. Again, she's physically strong. This is a hard matchup. We don't know where they're at right now. We know Murphy's rising. We know Joanne had a good performance her last fight. Wasn't the best, but she got the win. So yeah, I'm not sure. This is the first time in the history Zan is not sure. So I'm gonna just leave it at that.
Fair enough. So let's move on to fight number 7. This one will actually be my shortest prediction, so I'll go first. In the light heavyweight division, we have Eryk Anders taking on Darren Stewart. We know that this is a rematch. We know that they did fight 3 months ago. The fight ended in a no contest due to an illegal knee from Eryk Anders. He had Darren Stewart hurt. He was kind of clinching him against the cage. And for some reason, the IQ just went out the window and he threw a knee to his face. In that last fight, what's interesting is that it was actually a middleweight fight. Eryk Anders had, his stand-up looked better, especially in a fight where Darren Stewart was supposed to have a big striking advantage. Eryk Anders actually hurt him on the feet more than once. Eryk Anders was definitely physically stronger. We know that he is a big guy. We did expect that. And he implemented a very effective clinch against the cage using his size. Darren Stewart just couldn't move. Eryk Anders also dropped him. He had him hurt really badly. He basically won the fight. Had he not thrown that knee, Stewart either would have been too hurt or too tired to do anything in the remainder of that fight. So I don't see why 3 months later this fight will go any different. Obviously, we know Darren Stewart always has that puncher's chance. But, when you're analyzing this fight, you have to think it goes the exact same way as the fight did 3 months ago in terms of how the fight was going before that illegal strike. I'm going with Eryk Anders. I think he's the bigger fighter. He might even be better on the feet at this point. I don't know if Darren Stewart is just overrated at this point, but I'm going Eryk Anders.
Yeah, that's a fair pick, man. Let's be realistic though. Let me ask you something. Or let me say something to you. Unless me and you are in their fight camp, unless we're close friends of either fighter, after watching that last fight, how can you not pick Anders in this fight? Unless you have some type of inside information. There was no fight in between today or the fight on Saturday and the fight that happened last. There's nothing in between for you to look at. Unless you're in the camp with them, unless you're good friends with them, how can you not pick Eryk Anders to win this fight? You know what I'm saying? Like, what video footage can I look at, right? Like, they just fought a couple months ago, and there's nothing else available to the regular person like us to look at. So I'm gonna go Eryk Anders. And one thing I liked about his fight versus Darren Stewart the last time, he looked way different. Like, he's definitely I believe he's with a new fight team. I believe he has a new fight team. I gotta look into that again. But if you guys want to read about it, the people watching the video, I believe Anders has a new fight team that he went into on his last fight. And that's one of the reasons why he looked really, really well. So he's only going to get better at this point. 3 more months of work. So I'm going to go Eryk Anders here to win this fight. I got to go based off the last performance they both had. There's nothing else to sway me the other way. So Eryk Anders is my pick.
Sounds good to me. So we are going to move on then to fight number 8, the final fight on the prelims. We have Drew Dober versus Brad Riddell. Sounds like a close fight to me. How do you feel?
Yeah, this is a hard fight. It's another hard fight. Drew Dober, obviously, very experienced fighter, over 30 fights in total. In this fight, he's gonna have the grappling advantage. He has really good striking as well. He has heavy power. He can definitely put out Brad Riddell, just like Brad Riddell can also put out Dober. So this is a hard fight, but I think most of the fight's gonna be on the feet. I know Dober can take this to the mat, but Riddell has shown me when he fought Malarkey, he's fought some guys that want to grapple with him. He has shown that he can kind of get back to his feet and get back to the range he wants. So I believe Riddell's the underdog, and I'm gonna actually roll with Riddell. I think this has a good chance to be fight of the night. 2 really high level strikers. This fight can literally go either way. It's like who lands that heavy shot. But I like Riddell. I like his weapons here. And I think he can mix it up here in the striking. So I'm going to go Brad Riddell here to upset Drew Dober.
Yeah, and I'll keep it short on my end. I do agree with that Brad Riddell pick. Again, this is a very close fight of the night type of material for sure. In some ways, it is that flip a coin that you referenced earlier. In some ways, this fight is that. I think that although Dober probably has the bigger punches, first of all, I do think this fight should stay on the feet, at least for the majority of the fight. Although Dober has maybe the bigger punches, maybe a little bit more pop, I think Riddell maybe has the tighter combinations on the feet. To your point of both of them having that power, it could really be about who touches who first. And I think with Riddell having those tighter combinations, I think he may be the one to touch Dober first. But again, very close fight. I actually like Brad Riddell as the underdog here. Plus 120 is showing me some decent value. So he will officially, for the sake of the channel, he will officially be my pick as well. We're talking about odds. So of course we are going to get into Las Vegas. Let's take a look at what some of these odds present us with. Why don't we start with, essentially an underdog or two that you feel has the best opportunity to win?
Okay, if I'm looking at underdog, is Luigi underdog?
That he is, yep, plus 110.
Okay, let me ask you another question. Is Joanne an underdog?
Nope, Lauren Murphy.
Okay. And last question I got. Okay, no, I got all the questions answered. So my underdog pick, I'm gonna roll with Luigi Vendramini.
Sounds good. So my underdog pick, I'm actually going to provide two of them. I'm going with Brad Riddell as one of my underdog picks. And I'm also going to go with Lauren Murphy at plus 125. Again, I think, she has the tools to get it done here. So two underdog picks on my end. Now, in terms of perhaps one or two of your favorite picks on this prelim, who are you taking a look at?
Okay, so by the way, throw Brad Riddell on my underdog. I forgot. I was looking at my paper here, and I realized he's on the prelim. Like, I don't know what I'm smoking over here, but Brad Riddell is definitely one of my underdogs as well. But so we're gonna go favorites. I'm gonna go Eryk Anders.
Eryk Anders, yep.
And I'm gonna roll with Movsar Evloev. And I'm gonna roll with Carlos Felipe. I think he gets it done.
Carlos Felipe, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And Movsar Evloev as well. Pretty healthy 3-fight parlay, especially on the prelims. If you can get in on some early action, that would be amazing. $100 will return $366. For our bigger bettors, $250 will return a pretty healthy $916. So definitely keep your eyes on that and let us know in the comments how you feel about that parlay specifically. If I'm looking at two, perhaps a favorite fight of mine on this undercard, I'm looking at Eryk Anders as well. And I'm looking at Pannie Kianzad at minus 220. A smaller parlay, of course, being a two-fighter, plus 142, meaning that $100 will return $242. And for our bigger bettors, $250 will return still a pretty healthy $606. So we'll leave it at that. As usual, we definitely appreciate all of that algorithmic stuff. Subscribe to the channel, press the thumbs up on this page, or on this video, I should say. And let's have some really good discussion in the comments. Who are your underdog picks? Which picks are you feeling the most? Is there a parlay that you want additional insight and opinion on? Let us know in the comments, and we are more than happy to participate in that discussion. In the meantime, this has been the prelim card predictions for UFC 263, Israel Adesanya versus Marvin Vettori 2. Let's get this money.
Let's do it.